recognize what we need to talk about, we need to go back in time because this serves many purposes. We do this for many reasons. Number one, so that we could draw inspiration and courage about the different challenges that we faced as Muslims in the beginning days of Islam in San Joaquin County. Number two is to educate those of us that were not here during those days, during that era, so that we can recognize the bigger picture. We can see the bigger picture and understand where we came from and where we are going. So Islam in the past in San Joaquin County. How things were in the past. What I'm learning from other ulama kiram and elders of the community, and this is something which is being, like I'm learning verbally from the members of this community, is that, and anyone could correct me after the Jummah, because this is verbal education or like information that I'm asking certain individuals in the community and they're telling me these things. So from what I hear, how things were in the past is that in the Muslims have been around for a very long time in San Joaquin County, and how things were in the past is, from what I hear, is in the 1970s. In the 1970s, Maulana Ubaid Rahman Sahib came from Pakistan, and according to his son, he said that he got here, I think the 10th or 12th day of Ramadan, and they started to lead Taraweeh in a hotel somewhere in Stockton. And those days it was only Maulana Ubaid Rahman Sahib out here in Stockton in San Joaquin County, and we had Maulana Anwar Patel in San Jose, in SoCal, in Inglewood, etc. So from 1978, they read Taraweeh in various, in a hotel, and then the big masjid of Stockton was purchased, and then Lodi Masjid was purchased, and this is how our elders, they came together to the need of the community. Downtown Masjid was obviously established way earlier in the 1940s, and Muslims would flock to downtown Masjid for Jummah, for Eid, etc. And this is for those of us that basically don't know of these things. We're sharing this so that we may appreciate what we have going on today. Islam in this part of California wasn't as it was today. There were many struggles, there were many hurdles that our elders had to go through. And these people, when they came from their respective countries, regardless of where they came from, they put together whatever resources they had, and they did their best to do what they thought was best for the community. And Stockton Big Masjid was purchased, and then Lodi Masjid, and then V Street Masjid before that, and then you have all of these different organizations being established and coming into the picture. The luxury that you and I have today, that we're able to drive within 10 minutes or 15 minutes, we get to choose where we could go to pray Jummah. This was not a luxury in those days. Myself, again, being from Sacramento, Masjid al-Nur and the other masajid simply did not exist. due to their tremendous sacrifice, their efforts, their foresight. However, however these people were, okay, we're not going to judge, we're not going to point fingers. We need to look at the positivity, we need to look at the sacrifices these people made, and they did whatever they did best in their intentions, with their intentions, to ensure that the next generation of Muslims are able to identify themselves as Muslims. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them. Many of them have left us. Many of them are buried in Moray Cemetery, Sacramento, Livermore, wherever. Many of them have left us, and a lot of us may not even know their names. Those of us that are old enough that remember how things were back in the day, we may know their names. But quite literally, a person my age never even met these people. Quite honestly, right? So we make dua for them, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them with A'la al-Din, with Jannah Firdaus, and Sadaqah Jariyah, for everything that they have done for us. For them to do everything for us was absolutely amazing, inspiring. They tried their best. Okay, they tried their best. It's easy for us to sit here, literally in this masjid, and to critique how they were supposed to do things and how they should have done things. Quite simply, in those days, it was merely about survival. It was about survival. It was about, I'm trying to imagine how it was, is how to even identify yourself as a Muslim. To call a place of worship like our place as Muslims. This was the goal. And of course, there were many other goals of starting a madrasa, school, maktab, however, starting the graveyard that we have today, mashallah, which is a model for, I would argue, even the entire country, mashallah, is they had goals, they had all of these hopes and aspirations for us, but they have limited resources. The fact that they got so much done with their limited resources, and we are benefiting from their fruits today, it just shows how sincere and how amazing these people were. So again, what we have going on right now is not just simply someone came and dumped a wheelbarrow of money for us and said, right? Here's a masjid, here's like a barrel of money, like a monopoly man, right? And here's all the money you want in the world, then go ahead and build yourself a masjid. No, there are tremendous sacrifices, a lot of ulama made, a lot of people made. They did whatever they could to preserve the iman of the next generation. Now the question is, we're sitting here today, 2019, and a lot of these people have left us. And as far as I know, there is no written record of things that have happened that someone recorded, that this person did this in this year and that year, etc. I know of one person in Sacramento who's in his 70s who written some articles regarding this. Imam Hamdani, I know he wrote a few books, at least one or two books that he wrote of the history of Muslims, at least in Sacramento, right? I'm not sure how much he covered of San Joaquin County, etc. But it's important for us to understand our heritage, that how we got here as we are today. The next question, or the important thing that we need to discuss today, is, quite honestly speaking, with all due respect, we cannot do justice. We simply cannot do justice to what needs to happen in just less than a half an hour. The point is to bring these issues up so that we may, quite honestly, wake up and get into full throttle, as they say, so that we're able to hit our full capacity. Logically speaking, and it's proven, and we could tell ourselves as well, is that the limited resources our elders had back in the 70s, and they got so much done, we have arguably 10 times the resources today, and we're sitting around and we're complaining build on what we have for tomorrow? What do we need to do to ensure that, inshallah ta'ala, the next generation, like our kids, grandkids, how their children, they will remain Muslim. How our forefathers or our elders, regardless of where they came from, they had some insight, they had some vision of what Islam would look like in the 2000s, right, or in the late 90s, and they were doing these things in the 1970s. We similarly need to take some ownership and have some worry and concern about what Islam should look like versus what it will look like if we, quite honestly, do not step up to the plate and do those things which are necessary for us to do. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, and this is verified information here. As you can see, I tried to draw a map and point some things out, and I'm trying to point something over here. So, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, you have millions of Muslims from the Muslim world, right, as I'm showing over here, indicating. You have millions of Muslims that migrated to South America. Okay? This is late 1800s, early 1900s. You may say approximately, 50 to 100 years ahead of us. Okay? So you had millions of Muslims that migrated for whatever reason to South America. And of course, other migrations took place. You know, you had Muslims move to Europe, you had Muslims moving to America. But quite honestly, if you look at this from a perspective of timeline, that the number of Muslims that migrated to the West, right, South America, is quite astounding. Right? Millions of Muslims moved here to South America. I will share one incident so that we may learn some lessons regarding this. Okay? And I will keep it brief. I will try to keep it as brief and to the point as possible. The school where I studied my religious studies in South Africa was established in the 1980s, and when I was there, there were approximately 800 to 900 students from approximately 60 different countries all over the world. And every Ramadan, you would have requests from all over the world, where literally different masajid and different organizations would call our admin office asking for huffaz to lead Taraweeh for them throughout the world. So you had an international school where I studied for 7 years, where literally all over the world would have requests coming in that, oh, so and so, we need 2 huffaz in Norway. We need 2 huffaz in New Zealand. We need 1 hafiz in Ireland. We need 1 hafiz in this country or South America. And this is, honestly, this was the tradition of the school. This is how it was. Right? It may sound amazing, inspiring to us right now, but honestly, it's normal for me to see that. So every year, at the end of the school year, or at the end of the madrasa year, in Sha'ban, etc., you would have students that were already there in South Africa from all over the world. They would be sent literally again all over the world to lead Taraweeh throughout the world. So it's as random as you can get. I knew of Indonesians in South Africa that flew to Norway to lead Taraweeh, etc. In one of the final years of my studies there, I graduated in 2014. So this was the Ramadan of 2013. In the Ramadan of 2013, one of my classmates, Sheikh Talha, he flew from South Africa, right over here. He flew from South Africa to South America to lead Taraweeh. So that way we would get some kind of understanding of what the Muslim Ummah is going through based on literally us youngsters flying all over the world and basically reporting to each other what did we see in Ireland or in New Zealand, or like honestly I would report back and tell them what I did in Ramadan with my youngsters in Sacramento, etc. So this one youngster, he actually moved to South America for some years because of this, like you could say, possibly because of this incident. So he says, I met this one youngster. He's relating this incident with us. This is not like storytelling. This is like he's telling us himself. This happened to him himself. He said that during the day we would conduct visitations, meet Muslims throughout the day, because you have a lot of time on your hands, so what better thing to do than visit the Muslims in the locality. So during the night, they're leading Taraweeh, etc., and then during the day, they're visiting other Muslims, businesses, etc. So he said, I came across this one youngster whose ancestors came from a Muslim country. He still had a Muslim name, but he was a Christian. Again, we have this youngster in South America whose forefathers came from a Muslim country, who still had a Muslim name, but was a Christian, and like he was openly like a Christian, like I am a Christian. So they asked him, can you explain what's going on? Like, they knew that there were millions of Muslims that migrated to South America, etc. But can you tell us more about yourself? And you have a Muslim name, and you're identifying yourself as a Christian. What's going on? So, long story short, he brings them his family tree, right? He brings them his family tree, and they trace him back to Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Okay? They trace this youngster back to Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. I say this with a lot of pain in my heart, and to be honest, a lot of courage. It takes me a lot of courage to even, tie this in together. And we're not even beginning to attempt to disrespect any of the Sahaba Ikram radiallahu ta'ala anhu ajma'in. But the reality is that when millions of Muslims migrated to South America, unfortunately, there were some mistakes that they made. And from my humble perspective, we need to learn some lessons from their mistakes. So quite honestly, our children don't end up like how this youngster was in South America. And the reason why I've shared this piece of history with everyone is because this is not something that I read in some book that happened 700 years ago, right, in Baghdad or in some other random place in the world. No, I'm talking about recent history. This literally happened in 2013 in Ramadan, and I'm narrating this to you after 6 years that this is happening. This has happened, and many Muslims faced the same fate, where a lot of these Muslims, from the progeny, from the children of Sahaba Ikram, and they have left the fold of Islam, and which is unfortunate. It's heartbreaking. And I say this again with a lot of courage, so that as your Imam, I'm just trying to let everyone know that we have a lot of work to do. Okay, our elders, they did everything they did for us. We have these amazing centers throughout America, okay, throughout San Joaquin County. However they are running, we're not going to point any fingers, etc. But we need to do something for our next generation. So Luqman Hakim rahimahullah, he was once asked, how come you are so wise? And his response was, I learned from other people's mistakes. Then when they taught us Farsi, this was one of the translations we had to do in Farsi. Okay. So the question is, or some of you may be able to pose the question that Yasir, we have this challenge, we have this huge challenge in front of us. We see in recent, I would argue, Islamic history that you had millions of Muslims that migrated to South America, and millions of these Muslims have literally lost their iman. And you may ask this question, Yasir, what can we do about it? What's that answer, or what's that miraculous thing that you're going to pull out of the hat, right? To say, okay, this is like, what do we need to do, Yasir? We understand that this has happened and is already happening in the United States. I've visited many homes where the person's name was literally Muhammad, and he literally tells me I'm not a Muslim anymore. And this has happened to me already, right? So I'm not trying to bring too much negativity. I'm just trying to turn the heat up so that we can kind of wake up and become more active towards a solution that I present to the community. And quite honestly, I've been talking about this over and over and over again, and I'm not going to give up. As I referred to myself 1-2 Jummahs ago, I'm as stubborn as an old nail in some old piece of wood, right? I'm going to keep going, right? I'm going to keep going. What do we focus on? As the picture literally says, the picture, some pictures speak 1,000 words, right? Education. It has to start with education. It's as simple as that. It has to start with education. And I'm not talking about we have to build a seminary overnight. Okay, I'm not talking about we need to have like PhD level seminaries where we're pushing out scholars in theology and on different fields overnight. No. Yeah, that possibly could be the end goal. But what we need to do is, quite honestly, we have 3 steps. Step number 1 is, quite honestly, I've talked to hundreds of people since I got here, and I'm trying to address this issue from different perspectives. And quite honestly, in conclusion, what I'm sharing, number 1, literally the first step we have to take is stop finger pointing and become active. It's as simple as that. Because when we start to point fingers, then we lose out on progress. And quite honestly, for example, logically speaking, if I point fingers to my elders because they failed to do whatever they needed to do, then that automatically points fingers to their elders, because their elders taught our elders what deen was about, right? They didn't just come up with this stuff on their own. So we need to break this cycle, as I'm literally saying. We need to stop this cycle of pointing fingers and take some ownership ourselves regarding this aspect, which is extremely important, right? So for Allah's sake, let's stop pointing fingers and take some ownership and become active ourselves, number 1. What does this translate to? Yasir, what do you mean by becoming active? That is translated in number 2. Ensure your children are receiving Islamic education. So, in simple terms, 3-step process, right? Stop finger pointing, become active, and the way we stop pointing fingers at each other and we become active is we ensure that our kids are receiving Islamic education. And believe it or not, it starts from there. I've seen this for 7 years in South Africa, where everything that they have literally started from the afternoon Quran classes that I'm trying very hard to perfect here at CIC. It starts from there, believe it or not. And I don't have enough time to go into detail, like Yasir, how are these afternoon classes going to save the next generation? That, quite honestly, would require like an hour presentation. But trust me when I tell you that the step that we need to take to save the next generation's iman is through education. And what kind of education? Yes, I'm pointing to Islamic education. And the most effective way, the most effective model of Islamic education that we need to implement / have implemented here, and we need to implement throughout San Joaquin County, is Islamic education. And this brings me to the point where I've literally been harping on for as long as I can remember. I can't even remember anymore. Is as a community, we respectfully need to move on from only recitation of the Quran. Again, as the Muslim community, we need to move on from just teaching our kids to recite the Quran in Arabic and that's it. No, we have to move on from that. I'm telling you, you know how they say, I'm going to write it down for you, right? I'll write it down for you. It's not working, okay? Just teaching our kids just to read Quran in Arabic, it is not working. It is failing, and with all due respect, we are deceiving ourselves to believe that it's working because it's simply not working. One thing is to recite the Quran in Arabic, and one thing is to provide Islamic education. Big difference. Okay? It starts with education. It starts with Islamic education. It starts with these classes that we have happening here and elsewhere throughout San Joaquin County. Step number 3, and I say this honestly with a lot of courage. I'm having to draw a lot of courage to mention this because I'm a type of person, personally, if you know me well enough, I'm a type of person that does not engage in argumentation or fighting or none of that. I literally don't have the time for it, and I don't have the energy for it. I'll rather do something else than to argue with someone. Yes, people may say things to me, okay, geez, very good, but I'm just simply not going to engage in argumentation. That's just not the way I am. Now, the simple thing to do is, this is, again, out of character for me to say this, but I've put a lot of thought into this, is what we need to do as a community is take ownership, use your influence to bring change, to move on to Islamic education. If we decide to enroll our kids somewhere and they're only providing the recitation of the Quran classes and they're not providing Islamic education, we are deceiving ourselves. We enroll our kids wherever we can, and I'm not saying bring them here to CIC only. Take them to your local masjid. Okay? Islamic education is necessary for every child. Take them to the Lurai Mosque. Masjid al-Iman, Stockton Big Masjid, Medina Center. All the masajid are our masajid. Okay? I'm not sitting here advocating for CIC only. All our masajid are our masajid. Okay? So if your local masjid is not providing Islamic studies, then with all due respect, it's time that you take the time to take some ownership and, with all due respect, hold people accountable, pressure, change, positive change, with wisdom, love, sincerity, and all of these things. Because too much is at stake. Too much is at stake. Only the recitation of the Quran is not working. It's failing. We are deceiving ourselves. If your kids are enrolled somewhere and they're only reading Quran, I am telling you, with all due respect, it's not working. So take ownership, use whatever influence you have to push that system or whatever class they have anywhere going on to move on to Islamic education, because it is that missing piece of the puzzle that's going to allow us to save the next generation. And quite honestly, it begins with you. Every single one of you sitting here are responsible. Yes, as the Imam I'm trying to do my part, but quite honestly, if we care about the next generation, then we need to step up our game. We need to step up to the plate and honestly bring this positive change of moving on from just Quran classes to provide Islamic education. Again, it's education which will bring positive change that will allow our youngsters to grow up as responsible men and women, that will recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that will be able to maintain their marriages, that will be able to stay away from haram businesses, and all of these things. It's education. You educate them regarding what is haram. You educate them on how to deal with each other in a marriage. You educate them on how you respect your parents. It's education. That's the missing piece here. Jazakumullah khairan. For Brother Heaven.
Can you shortly say what Islamic education is? Because you kept talking about Islamic education.
Yeah.
Okay. But briefly clarify what Islamic education means.
Islamic education is not like a simple answer. It's the correct way or the proper way of providing Islamic education is by implementing a syllabus, just like everywhere else in the world, right? If you want to address competencies, right? If you want to instill such qualities in your children, you need to have a syllabus. It has to be a systematic approach, and we have such syllabi that we can choose from, inshallah. So, for example, here we have 7 subjects that we're teaching. The books that we have here.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha
of that person at any given moment in time by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What a person is expected to do by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any given time. This is what Islamic education allows you to do. For example, you're a youngster, Islamic education allows you to show respect to your elders, parents, teachers, etc. You get married, Islamic education teaches you to show respect to your wife, spouse, etc. You become a parent, Islamic education teaches you how to raise your kids and have that balanced life between your parents and your wife, spouse, etc. When you become a grandparent, Islamic education teaches you how to be an elder in your household, etc. So in just a few seconds, I just gave like an overview. It's Islamic education that allows us to know what we are supposed to do min Allah, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do, and this filters out culture and everything else that exists. It's the way of life, that's correct. And I would humbly request everyone I purposely don't announce what time Salah is taking place, because what ends up happening is we have people that literally come in the last 5 minutes just for Salah. The talk starts at 1 o'clock, so let's try to be here before 1 o'clock. The khutbah is supposed to start like a minute ago. Let's try to give at least an hour or an hour and a half for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for our Jummah, for our own spirituality. I'm not undermining those of us that have to be at work and we have responsibilities and all of that. I'm not talking about that. Those of us that are able to be here early, let's try to be here earlier and learn what we're supposed to learn. Jazakumullah khair.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salam. Hayya ala salam. Hayya ala al-falah. Hayya ala al-falah.
Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana li hadha wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها ثم عرضهم على الملائكة فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين. وقال يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. وقال النبي صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم فقيه واحد أشد على الشيطان من 1000 عابد. وقال من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له طريقا إلى الجنة. أقول قولي هذا واستغفره من كل ذنب إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الأكرم الذي خلق الإنسان وكرم وعلمه من البيان ما لم يعلم فسبحان الذي لا يحصى امتنانه باللسان ولا بالقلم، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه نجوم الطريق الأمم. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم واخشوا يوما لا يجزي والد عن ولده ولا مولود هو جاز عن والده شيئا إن وعد الله حق فلا تغرنكم الحياة الدنيا ولا يغرنكم بالله الغرور. وقال النبي صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم: طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. أقول قولي هذا واستغفره من كل ذنب إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. يَدْعُ